What's up, y'all? Y'all already know Hood Heroes TV. I'm coming on in. I ain't even wasting no time with y'all tonight, man. This gonna be real quick. This ain't gonna take no long time. I just wanted to chop it up with y'all. See if y'all came across. Oh, by the way, I'm broadcasting live from my mama house. Um, I like this picture she got up here. It's pretty. It's pretty nice. I like that backdrop. Can't get it all, but I think that's pretty funky. So yeah, I want to talk to y'all about something I came across that I found very interesting. And what it was um, this situation right here um, of this author that's getting the rounds on all the getting the rounds everywhere. So he's saying that Asian Americans showed that critical race theory cannot be true. Now, first of all, let me say this about critical race theory. Um, I got a lot of disagreements with critical race theory because it's a Trojan horse for queer race theory. They're using critical race theory to usher in queer race theory later on down the line. Another thing about critical race theory, you notice now they're not talking about reparations anymore. They're not talking about reparations because they did a three-car Molly, or they did the shell game where they did a switcherooski, and they said, okay, we got to talk about race. So we're going to start talking about critical race theory, but they're not talking about reparations. So I'm going to say this. Anytime y'all hear somebody talk about critical race theory, y'all need to challenge them on, oh, you critical race theory? All of you white liberal teachers, y'all for critical race theory, y'all need to automatically be for reparations then, if you for critical race theory. Don't let them talk about critical race theory and not talk about the financial component of what we are owed. Keep your foot on the gas when it comes to reparations. So I'm going to say that on critical race theory. Another thing about CRT that I have a problem with is it's not a theory. We know it's not a theory. We know that racism is institutional and that can be proven. So just the fact that they call it a theory, that's automatically setting us up for the okie doke. So I got problems with CRT, and the people that are funding CRT are funding CRT on both sides. They're financing it to be pro. They financing the folks that's pro CRT, and guess what? The same people are financing the people that are against CRT. This was a slick move to get us off of to just get us distracted and get us off reparations. But while I say that, I'm going to say this. We still have to confront and go toe to toe with this CRT narrative and deal with the pros and cons of it and not just throw the baby out with the bath. Because guess what? It's no way that they should be maintaining Confederate statues and racist monuments all over the country while saying we cannot learn about Black history in school. So that's what I'm saying the solution is. Damn CRT. We have to demand Black history in schools, period. They can't get around that. So the solution is not only demand it in public schools, but this is a good opportunity to use this as ammunition to say to our own community that look, this is the reason why you actually need to leverage your vote and get out there and vote, because they're not even allowing your babies to be taught history in schools. They're not even allowing it. So we can actually use the CRT argument as leverage as far as getting people out to the polls. Also, we need to be stepping to not only schools, school administrations, our community needs to learn our history aside from school. The Jewish community, they don't depend on public school to teach their children their history. They teach their children their history. Same thing with the Asian community. We need to be teaching our own children our own history. Our children need to be learning about the Tulsa riots, or my bad, the Tulsa massacre. But guess what? Black Wall Street wasn't the only massacre that took place. It was massacres all over the country. So I say all that to say, good. Y'all don't want to teach Black history in school? This is more so the reason that, oh, every church need to be teaching about Black history and the need for reparations. And this is proof that we actually are owed something, because they won't even teach this in schools. With all that being said, I want to speak on this Asian this article that's getting around in all the publications, not just The Hill, but in a lot of magazines, where it says Asian Americans showed that critical race theory cannot be true. So Kenny Zhu, author and president of the advocacy group called Color Us United, told The Hill that Asian Americans showed that critical race theory cannot be true. So what's the reason why critical race theory cannot be true? He says, in discussing differences between Asian American and Black education achievement rates in the United States, Zhu said the experience and historical disadvantages in both communities were of similar magnitude. That right there is hilarious, because guess what? What we went through is not similar to what Asian Americans went through. And we're gonna play this, and we're gonna see. I like the Hill for giving him a little pushback on this, but they didn't give him enough.
In his new book, An Inconvenient Minority, The Attack on Asian American Excellence and the Fight for Meritocracy, Kenny Xu examines, quote, affirmative action, the false narrative of American meritocracy, and America's unease about a minority, Asian Americans, potentially upending them.
Now, joining us today to discuss is author and president of Color Us United, Kenny Xu. Kenny, welcome. Thanks so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much, Emily and Ryan, for having me.
So your subtitle says a lot about the thesis of the book, but if you could just sort of walk us through the argument that you make in the book, that would be fantastic.
So we have a narrative right now that posits that white people are at the top and Black people are at the bottom, but what are they going to do with Asian Americans? Because Asian Americans do not fit this narrative. They are the inconvenient minority. They were historically discriminated against. They face discrimination. 80% of Vietnamese Americans arrived in this country without even knowing English. And within one generation, they were able to turn their kids into college graduates at a higher rate than even white Americans. So the American dream is real, and Asian Americans showed that critical race theory cannot be true. And because of this, Harvard University suppresses the story of Asian excellence by discriminating against them in the admissions process, because they base their admissions process based off of this critical race theory language, where Blacks are at the top for racial equity and then Asians are at the bottom. So An Inconvenient Minority really tells this story about the place of Asian Americans and the fight for meritocracy.
How do you parse that, given the different experiences? One population was brought in shackles and enslaved for several hundred years, and then suffered through almost a century of Jim Crow, followed by gains in the 60s and 70s, running smack into the deindustrialization of the economy, the decimation of public sector and union jobs and manufacturing jobs that had made up the bulk of the growth of Black wealth, combined with a
He looked confused as a mug. Look at him, man. Look how confused he looked.
With a different and disparate experience among Asian Americans. How do you kind of separate out those two things and come to a conclusion, a broad conclusion there?
Well, I can give you the most victim-y Asian narrative I could possibly give you. I mean, so many of these Asian Americans who've come here have literally fled from communism, from the Cultural Revolution, from Pol Pot, from dictatorships, from identity politics, and they've come here and they've faced discrimination in the United States, Chinese exclusion, Japanese internment.
But their culture wasn't stolen from them. Their culture was not wiped away from them. They did not have to undergo what we went through. And guess what? They chose to come here. Many of us were already here, but we didn't choose to be enslaved.
And yet they still achieve. What we always try to posit the worst victim narrative that we could, and you just did for Black Americans, but I could do the same for Asian Americans.
Well, the same is not.
Well, yeah, I would say
exactly accurate.
Well, I could do something of similar magnitude, but I don't think we should focus on that, because I don't think that we are living in that history today, and the reason why is because you have these Asian Americans whose talents were suppressed, but when meritocracy was able to expand, the Immigration and Naturalization Act was able to occur in 1965, legal discrimination was rolled back, not just for Black Americans, but for every minority group. Asian achievement was able to skyrocket.
And that's not true. We all know legal discrimination was not rolled back for us. That's why I say, when you think about the Immigration Act of 65, it came on the heels of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Immigration was used and weaponized against us.
Asian success was kept, and was discriminated against in this country, but we're living in an era where that is no longer really the case. And so you have to really focus on what the cultural values are and how that informs the discourse. In Asian Americans,
He said cultural values. What if your culture was taken?
Prove that you really can advance and achieve the American dream.
So your book deals with the
So yeah, I just wanted to show that right quick. Let's look at let's look at FAM's. This is the name of their website, right? So Color Us United is the name of the organization, colorusunited.org. And they're advocating for a race blind America. Wow, okay. That sounds great, don't it? The mission, Color Us United, advocating for a race blind America. Color Us United is a home for those who want to live in an America united in our individuality and freedoms. We will support those who fight for a united and free America. Now, you got to listen to the wording of this next paragraph, because he's going to show you who he's aiming at, who they're aiming at. We are the voice of those who oppose dividing America by race, religion, sexual orientation, or any other characteristic. We resist those who divide Americans in the name of racial equality in government, schools, corporations, journalism, or social media. We will promote we the people of these United States of America. So You got to laugh at any black leader that supports, that wants to get behind stop Asian hate and all of this stuff when it's not being reciprocated. They're literally trying to maintain racism. You got to think about how the Asians are filing lawsuits all over the country to stop, what do they say, affirmative action in schools. They want to get rid of affirmative action in schools because they have an issue with wealth distribution, the redistribution of wealth. And they got an issue with making sure that there's a fair amount of black folks getting accepted into universities because of what? Institutional racism, which leads us back to critical race theory, because that's the whole premise of it. That racism is an institutional system that hovers over the entire United States, whether you run into a Klansman or not. Racism is institutionalized. So let's look at these statistics. 85% of registered voters describe Americans as being greatly divided. 83 of Americans believe the country is divided by race. 33% of Pew Research survey weighted by racial representation reveals only 33% viewed race as significantly important in their lives. That's because if you're not affected by racism, you don't think about it. You don't have to think about it. Asian folks don't have to think about racism. White folks don't have to think about racism every day because it's so institutional, they don't even have to deal with it directly. But this last statistic, it just comes out of nowhere. 71% of Americans believe being a parent is the most important role they play in society. Where does that even come from? Where do y'all think that last statistic even comes from? That comes from them saying, hey, you can't blame racism. Blame yourself as a parent. Y'all just bad parents. Black people are bad parents. That's why he mentioned culture. So they're literally taking shots at black folks. But my issue ain't with them, believe it or not. My issue ain't with them. My issue is with these black leaders that actually do all the co-signing and all, get behind them and yada yada yada. That's who I have an issue with.
Here in New York, local leaders are speaking out about the ongoing attacks on Asian Americans, coming together to demand a stop to it. CBS 2's John Diaz now with more.
We are united in our anger.
Executive Director of the Asian American Federation, Joanne Yu, speaking right from the heart, saying Asian American hate crimes may have increased since the onset of the pandemic, but they've been going on well before that.
Name the violence as racism and white supremacy.
Like most Asian Americans, she is still reeling from the recent mass murder in Atlanta, Georgia. Police have yet to rule out a racial motive, since most victims were of Asian descent.
8 deaths. 6 of them are Asian women. Women who look like me, who look like my mom and my sisters.
Reverend Al Sharpton in the event today at the National Action Network headquarters in Harlem
It's
to
these
denounce the rise in
Negroes.
hate attacks against the Asian community, inviting all the mayoral candidates and many Asian American leaders, in part blaming the words of former President Trump for the
You go to
increase.
Boogeyman.
There is no such thing as Kung flu. We that have been the targets of hate should not let our Asian American brothers and sisters stand this alone.
Stop AAPI Hate, the nation's leading group addressing anti-Asian.
Confidential informant. Confidential informant Al Sharpton. I truly believe that these videos of these folks getting pushed to the ground, I believe they were staged for Andrew Yang's mayoral run.
Inviting all the mayoral candidates and many Asian American leaders, in part blaming the words of former President Trump for the increase.
There is no such thing as Kung flu. We that have been the targets of hate should not let our Asian American brothers and sisters stand us alone.
Stop AAPI Hate, the nation's leading group addressing anti-news.
If you only list your vacation home on Airbnb,
So
you
yeah,
might
man.
attract someone looking for a quaint little.
They're pitting kids against one another, not for quality. Competition is one thing, but to compete because of some arbitrary designation from the top down because of race, that is insidious and wrong for both the individual and for the country.
Wait a minute.
If you're talking about the problems of disparity, if you're talking about structural racism, education must be front and center. Our mission is to redistribute wealth. A lot of people bristle at that phrase. That is, in fact, the phrase we need to use. The status quo is broken. For thousands and thousands of students in neighborhoods all over New York City, the message has been, these specialized schools aren't for you.
There were too many Asians, and that is an offensive thing. You should never say that there's anything like too many of this or overrepresented, underrepresented. That's kind of ridiculous.
I received a letter from Chancellor Porter. I mean, to say things like our children, our Asian children, Asian American students, not the students of New York City.
Now, they never consider black children their children. They never do that. They never consider themselves their children. And look at that. Y'all see who's back there? Y'all see Buddy in the red beret back there? He also ran for mayor. He's running for mayor. He's going to lose. He's running on the Republican side. He's one of them, what they call them cats, the guardian angels. He started the guardian angels, Republicans. But these is who Al Sharpton is lining up with. That's why we got to put people over party, because these so-called black leaders, they do not have our backs. All right, it's all about the people, damn the party.
Who is she defining as our?
She was trying to find instead scapegoats. That is unacceptable.
So that's all I'm saying, man. You can't take these folks seriously. Now keep in mind, all of this revving up, and notice you ain't really heard nothing about it after the mayoral race in New York. You ain't really heard nothing about it, right? Isn't that interesting? So that's your boy Yang. I'm trying to see the other video of Yang. Yang is a wild cat, man. Now check this out. Check out Yang on this.
Debated ahead of the June 22nd ranked choice primary, and Andrew Yang stood out as particularly vicious. Here's a quick taste of his rhetoric about New York's most vulnerable.
Yes, mentally ill people have rights, but you know who else have rights? We do. The people and families of the city. We have the right to walk the street and not fear for our safety because a mentally ill person is going to lash out at us.
So that's just a 10-second clip. He goes on a much longer rant later, but homeless people distinctly othered in that statement. We rights, they are mentally ill, they're scary. And his proposal is essentially to institutionalize them through forced commitment against their will. But he didn't stop there.
The fact is, mentally ill, homeless men are changing the character of our neighborhoods. A woman, my wife Evelyn is friends with in her mom group in Hell's Kitchen, was punched in the face by a mentally ill man. Sent a picture of her bruised face around the mom group, spread like wildfire. This is happening in New York City, and we're not talking enough about it. Families are leaving as a result. In East Harlem, the neighborhood has been changed. Upper West Side, the neighborhood has been changed. We owe our people and our families better than this, and I'm frustrated by the political nature of these responses. And we're not talking about housing affordability. We're talking about the hundreds of mentally ill people we all see around us every day on the streets and the subways. We need to get them off of our streets and our subways into a better environment. And when you ask what I'm going to do differently, I'm going to rebuild the stock of psych beds in our city, because the number's gone down 14%. It should be going up 100% until there are resources necessary for anyone who's mentally ill to not be on our streets. It's not right for them. It's not right for our city. There will be no recovery until we resolve this. I will fix this, New York.
Thank you, Mr. Yang.
That is the greatest non-answer I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean, Stringer then goes after, oh, how are you going to pay for it? Which is great line of attack there, but there's so much there. This rhetoric should not come as a shock because Andrew Yang just 2 days ago was endorsed by the NYPD Captains Union. This is who's funding his campaign as well, or who's running it at the very least, has ties to the police union. He's one of the 2 candidates in the race who will not defund the police or cut their budget in any way. The other one's Eric Adams. So he's leaning into what they want to hear. And Yang's UBI plan, which isn't a UBI, saps resources from homeless services and then gives stipends for once-a-year checks, and you'd have to forego government services in order to receive it. So it's actually libertarian garbage, but it comes back to his resentment towards homeless people. And what he equates there is real New Yorkers. Homeless people, they're not real New Yorkers. They're absolute horror for wealthy New Yorkers to have to look at homeless people. He equates that to their human dignity. And there is something really insidious behind his rhetoric here. It was really disturbing to watch, and it goes to show that when you're running a libertarianish kind of right-wing campaign under the guise of progressivism, this is really what's beneath the surface. But
yeah, so that's all I'm saying, man. We got to be mindful of not falling for the okie doke when it comes to who's supposed to be representing us, these so-called black leaders. Be weary of anybody that say vote blue no matter who. And damn a party, put the people before the party, man. It's all about the people. We got some comments. Let's see. Yes, Asian race devil copycat of whites. If you were here in the 40s, those white race devils would have put you in a camp. Facts. B, only people fighting for equality are blacks. We know that, man. We absolutely know that, B. And yes, they maintain superiority of Caucasoid genes. Now, guess what? This is the funny thing about that, B. Keep in mind, white folks are Asians. I'm going to say that too. White people are Asians. White people are Asians. How do I know? Because what do they call them? Caucasians. The Caucasus Mountains are in Asia. There is no such thing as Europe. Europe is not a continent. Europe is on the continent of Asia. So whites are Asians too, as far as they see it. We know who the original Asians was. I'm not even gonna go there with it, but we was over there first. But as of today, Caucasians, who are white folks, are Asians. So Asians identify themselves more with being whites than they do with being us. But when they get in the issue, they want us to fight for them because we are the mules. We the mules. We supposed to fall for it. And then confidential informants like Al Sharpton. Yes, he was a confidential informant. He's 12. I can't even call him 12. Confidential informants like Al Sharpton, who are on a leash by the Democratic Party, get out there and say, we need to fight for stop Asian hate. Meanwhile, sisters go into nail shops and get attacked by Asians with broomsticks and no one says anything. All right. So I just wanna chop it up about that. Some of the foolery that they actually got going on when it comes to this CRT thing, and when it comes to Asians saying that, oh, because Asians are successful, there can be no uh, there's no need for critical race theory. So that's all I got, man. I'm gonna holler at y'all in a little bit. Thanks for the love. And yeah, it's all good, man. We here.